Welcome to Hometown Culture, your weekly Orlando Magic podcast, where your host Seth will be unpacking the news every week. Free agency had its start on Sunday, and since then we have seen some pretty big dominoes fall, not only for the Orlando Magic, but for many other teams throughout the league. We'll be going over the winners and losers so far in free agency, as well as some of the key moves that have been made, especially for the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic have signed Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to a 3-year, $66 million contract, with the last year of that deal being a player option. And let's get into why this signing is so huge. We talked about this signing last week going into the weekend, and I was super excited for the prospect of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, what he could possibly bring to the Orlando Magic. Now, I did mention that I did want to somehow find either a big man or a playmaking guard or something to kind of pair up with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And the signing was really big. It came on Sunday night before the Paul George decision that happened early Monday morning, because apparently Paul George loves to deliver his news in the early morning hours for some reason. But the Orlando Magic decided to sign Kentavious Caldwell-Pope before even having a meeting with Paul George, I believe. Or I can only assume, right? And you look at this signing here, and in the moment, it was very much okay, the Magic went out and got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. We could go out and get another free agent, or we could work on retaining some of our guys. We'll see what they decide to do. But the main thing was, okay, this signing makes it clear that Jalen Suggs is going to be the point guard this season. Now, if we believe in Jalen Suggs as the point guard of this Orlando Magic team, then I think we'll be set. But I don't think many fans and many people in general have that belief outside of the Magic organization themselves, because Jalen Suggs, while he has been somewhat effective as the lead point guard on this team, he does not provide nearly the amount of playmaking that you'd want, and he has not been the slasher that you would want in him as much, especially last season. And so bringing in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, like we said last week, is basically upgrading your shooting guard position to a more consistent, more reliable three-point shooter and a better defender on the guard space, a bigger defender. I think Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was 6'5", so a guy who essentially betters your defense and betters your three-point shooting and can space the floor, is more respected from the three-point line than anyone else on your team, right? And so it was definitely a move to get you guys to be better. And ultimately, like I said last week, ultimately it's going to come down to Franz and Paolo and Suggs, I guess as well as being as one of our cornerstones, one of our pieces that we are probably not going to be letting go anytime soon, to get better, because we can only do so much, but it's really going to be up to how far is Paolo going to be willing to take us. And personally, I'm okay with the fact that we got a guy who does not demand the ball as much as, say, a Klay Thompson or Paul George, because with the idea of a third star or a guy who might even become the number 2 option instead of the number 3 option behind Paolo and Franz, but becoming the number 2 option behind only Paolo, it made it seem that we were going to be shorting the development of our 2 young stars. And I didn't want to do that, especially with them being so young. Like, Paolo is literally 21, going on 22 years old. Franz, I believe, is 22, 23 years old, whatever, right? They're super young, and I didn't want to jeopardize their development into whatever they could be for the sake of trying to be more competitive in the playoffs and make a deeper playoff run with no real championship in mind. Because at this stage of the development, at this age, you look at this team and you don't see a championship team in the next 1 or 2 seasons. You see a team that can be good, that can be playoff contenders, but I don't see the pathway to a championship really soon. The path to a championship takes a long time, and many players do not get their first championship until they are closing on their late 20s. And so I looked at that and I was like, okay, we have time. So let's go and get people that are going to complement these guys to help further their development. And I think that's what Kentavious Caldwell-Pope does. It spaces the floor for Paolo and Franz, and it adds a great defender. I think that it shows that the Magic do not want to compromise any part of their defense for the sake of offense, which I think is why Tyus Jones was not an option. I think the similar reasons for like Monte Morris not being an option is that defense not being quite there, and you could potentially see that in other free agents as well. Like, I don't think Jonas Valanciunas' defense was as appealing to the Magic as they would want it to be able to go after him properly, right? And so it's very interesting to see where this team is right now and where they're going to be going here next season. And the Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I've talked about Kentavious Caldwell-Pope a lot in the last week's episode. I'll touch upon it a little bit more. He is a 40% three-point shooter without fail. He is much more reliable than Gary Harris. Gary Harris played, I believe, only around 50 games last season, if I remember correctly. I can actually pull up his games played in the last few seasons here. But you had Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's played, I believe, over 90% of his games, right? Gary Harris has not played more than 60. Has played more than 60 games once in the past 4 seasons, and in those other seasons he's played under 50 games twice, and he's played 54 games last season. So his availability on the floor, Gary Harris, has not been nearly as good or reliable as a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who is consistently getting 70, almost 80 games per season, and has only gone under 70 games during the COVID years. And so I think that just shows how much more reliable Kentavious Caldwell-Pope can be, not only being a better player overall than Gary Harris, but also being a guy who is on the floor, right? And I think that it allows for us to move Gary Harris to a bench role, which is where I think he's more suited. I think that Gary Harris throughout this season, he felt like a bench player playing a starting role, right? And I think you could see that because we were relying on Gary Harris a little bit more than I would have wanted to, especially considering how he delivered. And I think that a good starting lineup that would have been better for us would have been potentially like an AB Jalen Suggs, at least during the regular season, instead of going Jalen Suggs and Gary Harris, just to help the development of Anthony Black. But now, of course, we're going to see our 4 stars that are solidified: Suggs, Caldwell-Pope, Franz, and Paolo, right? And then the center position, probably Wendell Carter Jr. unless he gets traded or something, right? But I think that this gives us a solid starting lineup with starting caliber players throughout the starting lineup. And I think that it strengthens our bench, because our bench now, we see a guy like Gary Harris who can come out and still space the floor. Even though he's not as much of an effective shooter, he still has proven that he can be near 40%. I think he was like the 37% shooter last season. So it's not like he's a terrible shooter. It's not like he's shooting 30%. Granted, he did shoot 30% in the playoffs, but we're talking regular season games where he's going to be relied on more than in the playoffs. Regular season games, he shot 37% from 3, and that's all you really need from a guy coming off the bench. You don't need the guy coming off the bench to be as consistent as your starters, right? And so I feel more confident with Gary Harris coming off the bench, especially since now we also have more news about the Magic's other free agency windows, which we'll get into. But I think Gary Harris coming off the bench is a much better role for him. I think it will help increase our defense coming off the bench as well. And we also had him and Anthony Black being able to go out, and him being able to space the floor with Anthony Black, who is a non-shooter, being able to do his thing and figure himself out there, right? And so I really like the signing. I really like how it improves the Magic. And we also saw the Magic making some moves to further keep the continuity going with this roster. And We saw it when we signed Goga Batadze, 3 years, $25 million, gave him a nice, pretty check for his contribution last season. Very much deserved. I think that we're setting his market higher, and I think that's something that we don't necessarily owe him, but I think he's deserved it, and I think that we can give it to him and be gracious and kind, or not gracious, but kind to him with that, right? And then we also had Gary Harris sign 2 years, $14 million, a massive pay cut from what he used to be making, but it makes sense. He's a bench player, and his production is not nearly going to be the same in next season as it could have been in previous years. His usage rate is probably going to go down tremendously, and so 2 years, $14 million is something that I looked at, and I was like, okay, I'm okay with that. That seems like a pretty solid deal. We're chilling with that, right? And then Mo Wagner, 2 years, $22 million, a nice little bit of a pay boost there as well for Mo Wagner. Much deserved. And now the underrated extension of the offseason, we had Jonathan Isaac extended 5 years, $84 million. And there was mixed reactions to this. I've seen people react positively because they know how great Jonathan Isaac can be. I've also seen people react extremely negatively because Jonathan Isaac's injury history. And I will say this about Jonathan Isaac. I think that Jonathan Isaac is one of the best defenders in the entire league. Some people will argue that he's the best one-on-one defender in the league. I think that he is one of the best. I don't think it's a stretch to say that he's the best, but I think it's more of a conversation at the very least, for sure. And I think that when Jonathan Isaac is on the floor, he makes a huge impact. And the issue with him being on and off the floor is an issue really with just, I think, poor taste for Magic fans, having a bad taste in the mouth from having Jonathan Isaac be out for so many years since his ACL injury. And now what I think fans can fail to overlook, or can really overlook, fail to see, is that Jonathan Isaac played 58 games last season. That is more than what was expected, for sure. I believe that anyone had expectations for Jonathan Isaac to play 58 games last season. I think that the hope was that he would at least get to 41 games, 41 to 45 games last season. I think that was the hope, considering his injury history and considering everything that he has gone through. He played 58 games last season. He made a huge impact on the Magic's abilities. He helped seal the Magic's playoff spot this season as well towards the end of the year there. So this contract, I think, is well deserved. It's front loaded, which I believe it's front loaded. I think he'll be getting the bulk of that contract in the next season or two, and I think that is a great way to retain Jonathan Isaac with not much fear, or not much of a chance of losing out on this guy, right? Because you keep him for relatively cheap over the course of the next five seasons, especially with the way that the cap room is going to be improving in the next few seasons. We have the cap space improving by 10%, or projected to be improving by 10% with the new CBA deal, right? And so I think that Jonathan Isaac being on this contract for the next 5 seasons, while the cap's going to be continuously going up and up and up, is a huge win, because he can be such an impactful player. And if he can continue to show his impact, if he can continue to get back to a better offensive game that he had back before he was injured, and maybe even improve in some areas, then I think it'll be great. I think that people forget that this is his first season back from his ACL tear. And so, his first true season back from his ACL tear, right? And so there was flashes of really, really great things, and there's also moments where it was like, man, can Jonathan Isaac hit a shot, And so I have faith in Jonathan Isaac. I think that he will be able to figure his offensive game out and continue to be a great defensive option, versatile defensive player and can be a really big and solid help for us going forward in trying to play winning basketball here, right? So I really like the signing. Overall, just bringing back the people that we had last season. I think we're losing out on some of our reserve guys. I think Marco Fultz is for sure gone. But I think that what we've gained in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Tristan da Silva through the draft, and what we're retaining, but in different roles. Like Anthony Black's going to be in a more immediate backup spot this season. The Gary Harris is going to be a bench player instead of a starter this season. And you're going to see, hopefully, Jet Howard play a little bit more as well this season. Caleb Houston's still there. Like we have these players that are going to have different opportunities and more time to shine and more time to develop. And I think that's going to be really, really cool. It might cause for some growing pains at points in the season, but I think it's going to be really, really good for this team to really grow and develop into the team that is going to go out and win a playoff series. It's going to go out and make some noise and be threatening, even more threatening than they were last season. And it's a great step for the Magic in the right direction. I think we got better this offseason, are going to have the continuity to continue to carry our momentum from last season, and we have the availability of the players that we have under contract right now and have signed right now to be able to maximize the development of our young talent, such as our recent draft picks and our young stars. So amazing offseason by the Magic. I'm really looking forward to next season, really looking forward to Summer League to see some of these guys ball out and see where they potentially are in their development. But until then, I'm just super excited to see. But there's also been a lot of news around the rest of the NBA. So let's get into that and talk about how it could affect the Orlando Magic going forward. So NBA free agency started, and that also means that not only the Magic are making moves, but many teams around the league are making significant moves, trying to get better, trying to reach new heights. And it has been very interesting to see what teams around the league have done. And we've seen some very, very big moves from many, many different teams. So to start, the Paul George decision. The Philadelphia 76ers signed Paul George to a 4-year, $212 million deal, max contract. And this is what I heard Kenny Beecham say about the signing. It's not about signing Paul George for his value right now, like he's going to be playing the same 4 years from now. It's about signing Paul George and paying that money for the next 2 years of Paul George, where your window's open and you have the chance to win a championship with Joel Embiid. That's what you're paying the money for. And in that sense, it's a pretty understandable signing. You also had them re-sign Tyrese Maxey. They got Eric Gordon. They got Andre Drummond. That team is looking pretty competitive, and they got much, much better. And I think that they're going to be towards the top of the Eastern Conference, barring any serious injuries. And I mean, that's kind of a gamble there, because you do have two stars who are very injury prone, with Joel Embiid and Paul George both being on the roster. But I think that this team improved a ton. They put themselves in a position to win, and they're going to be a very, very challenging team to face in the Eastern Conference for the next few years. We also had the Klay Thompson decision as well. Klay Thompson went to the Mavericks in a sign and trade deal that ended up sending, I believe, Josh Green. I believe it was Josh Green to the Warriors, and then 2 second round picks or something like that to the Charlotte Hornets. Oh no, Josh Green was sent to Charlotte instead, and the Warriors received a couple of draft picks. And very unfortunate end to the Warriors dynasty. And you just can imagine how much Steph might be struggling with the idea of staying in Golden State here. And I think that he's probably going to be a lifer. I don't see Steph anywhere else outside of Golden State. But you see the tarnished relationship between Klay Thompson and the Warriors front office, and him deciding to move on to the Dallas Mavericks. And it was a rough year for Klay Thompson, for sure. You also have to understand that for Klay Thompson, he is aging, and he is still coming off of those horrible injuries that kept him sidelined for 2 seasons. He won and was a contributor in 2022 with their championship, and then last season was he injured last season? I don't remember, but he has not been like the Klay Thompson we remember whatsoever, right? Which is understandable. But you look at his numbers from this season, he was really, really struggling at the beginning of this season, and then towards the end of the season, he started picking it up, getting his numbers back up, shooting a lot more efficiently. But the hope for Klay Thompson in Golden State was just long gone, and there was no love for Klay Thompson and in the front office to give Klay what he wanted. And Klay wants to win. Klay wants to put himself in a position to win, and a position to succeed and not play the rest of his days out with a bunch of drama like he was getting with the Warriors, with a bunch of drama like he would have gotten with the Lakers. So ultimately, the Mavericks came in, picked him up, and the Mavericks picking up Klay Thompson, losing, unfortunately, I believe they lost Derrick Jones Jr. to the Clippers, which is very unfortunate for them, but they put themselves in a position where they can still potentially come back next season and make it to the finals once again. They have made their improvements, and yes, they've had their deductions, but they also can bank on Luka being a lot better next season, a lot better conditioned, a lot better mentally and mannered. I think that they're going to be very, very dangerous next season with the addition of Klay Thompson, getting even more championship experience from a guy who has done it 4 times. And so it's going to be very, very interesting to see how all that transpires over in Dallas. We also had the Oklahoma City Thunder taking home Isaiah Hartenstein. OKC has also had a hugely successful offseason, getting Alex Caruso in the trade for Josh Giddey, and then re-signing some of their guys and signing Isaiah Hartenstein as well. Just an amazing offseason for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think that they improved their roster, improved on what they needed, and have really made themselves real championship contenders going into next season. I think that they should be the favorites right now looking into next season to come out of the West, especially with the hits that Denver has taken, the lack of moves and loss of like Kyle Anderson that the Timberwolves have taken. And I think their only real competition right now is the Mavericks in terms of the moves to improve. And so you look at this team for OKC, one of the youngest teams in the league, and you're very, very hopeful for this team and very excited, I believe, to see this team come out and start winning and be a real threat to the rest of the league here like they were last season. And I think that for Magic fans, can look at the Oklahoma City's production and look at OKC and what they've done and how they took the playoffs and immediately improved from their playoff losses and what they were struggling in. And I think that some Magic fans can get lost in the idea of like, we need to improve from our weaknesses right now and fix everything right now, when sometimes it's a process to fix things. Right now, the market for a lot of the Magic's weaknesses was just not there, and it was unfortunate. The Thunder happened to not have great rebounding, and a great rebounder was available. The Thunder also needed a better backup for their guard positions, and Alex Caruso was available, and they took him. And so I think that the Thunder were also in a better position right now to make those decisions because they are so ready to win now. They were the number one seed in the West last season, and they made it to the second round and went to 6, I think, with the Mavs in the second round last season in an amazing series. And they have a guy who is an MVP caliber player. They are much further along in their rebuild than the Magic are, and I think that it makes sense for them to be attacking their weaknesses so aggressively. Right now, the Magic are nowhere near the level at their rebuild right now that the Thunder are right now, and that's okay. It's just a little bit of a longer process, and I think that the Magic can eventually get there. You just gotta give it time. Remember, Shea is like 25, 26 years old, and Paolo's only 21. So we have time here. We have time, and yes, the waiting sucks, but I would rather wait and receive a championship than try to compete now only to be a playoff team for the next 10 years. So I think that it's going to be very, very interesting to see where the Magic go. I know a lot of people fear Paolo also leaving the Magic as well if they don't make moves. But once again, this is Paolo's second season. And there you have to give the offices time, and you have to be willing to give the front offices time. I think that there is no doubt in my mind that Paolo is going to sign a maximum rookie extension, if not a supermax if he qualifies for it by the time that his extension comes up. I think that it's what happens after his rookie extension that matters. Like after his second contract is up, what happens after that? How do we try to set him up to win in that span of time, to really compete for a championship in that span of time? That will make him that will be a real deciding factor in whether or not Paolo stays in Orlando for the foreseeable future of his career. And so I'm not afraid to wait and to take my time with things with Paolo and with this team. So I think that we just need to take a step back and understand, like, hey, winning takes time, and making the improvements that we did this offseason is going to help us get to the point of winning, but we must be patient to get there, you know? And so, yeah, but OKC, major moves, amazing moves for the Thunder. And you also had the Clippers trying to do some damage control after losing Paul George. What they got in return, I mean, they re-signed James Harden to a deal that I felt was pretty big for James Harden, especially considering that no one was really on the market for James Harden. So I think it was a pretty big deal for James Harden considering the circumstance. I also think that the Kevin Porter Jr. signing was pretty random and not warranted whatsoever. So we'll see what the Clippers look like next season, how they play, but it's not instill confidence in me, especially when your star player can't stay healthy for a full season at all. Like, it is impossible for Kawhi to be healthy enough to really compete and win. So it'll be interesting to see how this team develops, but their window with the Kawhi era, I believe, is completely closed. Whether they're competitive enough to get into the playoffs again, I mean, it doesn't matter. I think they're going to be a first round out no matter what happens in the next season. And yeah, you also had the Knicks, like we said, going out and trading and extending OG Anunoby, trading for Mikal Bridges. That happened before free agency, so we're not going to talk about that as much. But we also have the Lakers finally re-signing LeBron James. And the Lakers, they were stated that LeBron was going to take a pay cut to try to get some other talent. And then the Lakers sat on their hands and did nothing this offseason but have a bunch of players get extended because of their play options. And as I can only imagine how frustrating that can be as a Lakers fan, knowing that LeBron is going to be retiring in the next 2 to 3 seasons and not being able to really help get like any other talent for LeBron's last window, right? And so it definitely sucks for Lakers fans. It definitely sucks for LeBron fans, but overall, like, the Lakers are going to be the Lakers, and they might make the playoffs. They might not. Who knows? But they're going to be the Lakers, and they're going to be covered because LeBron's 39 and he's going to be gone soon. So they're going to be covered for the next 2 seasons at least, and we'll see how much longer LeBron has on his career. But he signed a 2-year deal, so that seems pretty telling to the potential of the end of his career right there. And so we'll see what happens with the rest of LeBron's career, see what happens to the Lakers. But overall, free agency this season, a lot of role players being signed everywhere, a lot of big moves and key moves, and it's going to be very exciting to see how the NBA shapes out next season and what teams really take that jump to try to dethrone some of these other big name teams right here and big heavy hitters over the last few seasons. But that about wraps up my talk and conversation about the NBA's free agency so far. We still have some free agents still available that have not gone yet. One of the most notable ones being DeMar DeRozan, and another one being Markelle Fultz, like role player as Markelle Fultz. I think Markelle Fultz deserves to be on a roster spot. I think he's good enough to be on a roster spot, even though his lack of shooting is very tough on teams. I think he's so effective on other sides of the ball and everything else that I think he deserves to be on a roster spot. And then I also think that DeMar DeRozan, for as talented as he is, needs to be on a roster spot. And I'm shocked that he has not found work anywhere yet. But we'll see who decides to sign DeMar DeRozan. It just depends on how much the teams are willing to give him and what his market is, for sure. Because I think that he was trying to look for like $40 million with the Bulls, which is very much not something that I think is going to be possible for DeMar DeRozan given his market and given his value right now. But we'll see. The free agency pool is still going strong, and we'll see what else happens with free agency going forward and going into summer league. And before we head out, I wanted to give a shout out to Kemba Walker. And Kemba Walker's not going to listen to any of this, but Kemba Walker retired from basketball I think yesterday, and it is pretty remarkable, his career, how he played in Charlotte, being able to bring that team to the playoffs. Really one of the only great moments for Charlotte in recent history, besides the LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges era back like years ago. But for real, Kemba Walker was a short guard who was able to make it work and be an all-star in this league, and it's going to be very cool to see him around as part of the Charlotte Hornets coaching staff. But congrats to Kemba on a fantastic career, and I hope he does great things for the coaching staff in Charlotte. But that about wraps us up for today. I hope you guys did enjoy. As always, please leave in the suggestions down in the comments section below or in the Q&A on Spotify how I can improve this podcast for all of you guys and what else you may be wanting me to talk about going forward and in this offseason as we move forward here. The Summer League's coming and the Olympics are coming shortly thereafter. It's going to be an amazing time for basketball, and I can't wait to cover all of it. But anyways, I'll see you guys next week. I hope you guys have a blessed day. God loves you. Peace.